I am Elias Hawthorne, 85 years old, and I believed I had instilled solid values in my stepdaughter. I was mistaken. Last Wednesday, she and her husband burst into my den. My son in law, Harlan, slapped a document onto the desk. $3,000 old timer, he snarled, his breath reeking of stale whiskey and misplaced entitlement. Cover your dues. My stepdaughter, Leora, merely bobbed her head, her posture rigid with unspoken complicity. Settle the dues or vacate father. She erupted at last, her shout reverberating through the home I had constructed with my own hands, the walls seeming to absorb the betrayal like a sponge in a storm. I simply gazed at them, the air thick with the musty scent of aged wood and lingering regret. Then I inclined my head deliberately, ascended the creaky stairs that groaned under my weight like old bones protesting the cold, retrieved my satchel, and departed. They were oblivious that the property had eternally been mine. They were unaware I possessed the whole estate, and they assuredly didn't know I had covertly liquidated it right from beneath their feet for $940,000. When the fresh proprietor initiated the removal proceedings, she phoned me in a frenzy of hysteria. My response rendered her utterly mute. Before I proceed with this tale, I'm curious about your locations as you tune in. Share in the comments section, and kindly press that like icon and join the channel if you hold that reverence for your seniors is utterly indispensable. The hardwood floors in my den were weathered yet impeccably maintained, each plank whispering stories of decades past underfoot. Miriam had always insisted on spotless surfaces, her gentle reminders echoing in my mind like a faint melody carried on the wind. I was mopping a minor tea stain by the window, the cloth damp and warm against my calloused fingers when the entryway door crashed ajar, shaking the antique frame with a violence that set my heart thudding in quiet alarm. I didn't need to pivot. Such a furious intrusion could only signify one individual. Harlan. My son-in-law Harlan Whitaker strode into my den as if he had already claimed dominion over it, his boots leaving faint scuffs on the floor that grated against my senses like nails on chalk. He was a wiry fellow, compact in stature, but he bore himself with a baseless haughtiness, the sort forged from sampling fleeting authority and craving it like a parched man in the desert. My stepdaughter Leora trailed him, her gaze averted, fixed on the faded rug. She lingered near the bookshelf, arms folded tightly, as if shielding herself from the chill draft seeping through the cracks in the old windows. "We're present, Eli," Harlan declared, his tone laced with a smug undercurrent that prickled my skin. He invariably addressed me as Eli, never father. Never. Mr. Hawthorne, just Eli, as though I were a casual acquaintance from some dusty tavern. I rotated unhurriedly, the moist rag still clutched in my grip, its fibers rough against my palm, a tactile anchor amid the rising tension. I observed that Harlan, "You're scuffing the floors with those boots." I remarked, my words steady, despite the knot tightening in my chest. He scoffed a brief grating noise that hung in the air like smoke. "Disregard the floors, old timer." He delved into his ill-fitting jacket pocket and extracted a creased sheet. He didn't extend it courteously. He flung it. It slid across my desk, absorbing the residual tea, and halted precisely before me, the ink blurring slightly at the edges. I examined the document. It was a notice formatted to mimic officialdom, brimming with jargon he presumed would intimidate me, the words stark against the paper, like accusations etched in stone. "What is this?" I inquired, though intuition already whispered the truth, a cold whisper that slithered down my spine. "That what?" he retorted, jabbing the sheet with a polished nail that gleamed unnaturally. "Is your ultimate alert, $3,000 monthly. That was the pact. You're 4 months delinquent. That's $12,000 plus penalties." His timbre was icy scripted, reveling in the power he wielded, his eyes narrowing with a predatory glint that made the room feel smaller, more oppressive. I glanced at Leora. She persisted in scrutinizing the floor, her shoulders hunched as if bearing an invisible burden. "Leora," I prompted, my voice subdued, laced with a plea that echoed unspoken years of shared memories. She recoiled slightly, a flinch that cut deeper than words. This wasn't my stepdaughter. My stepdaughter was the young woman I had guided through her first horseback ride on these very fields. The one who wept when her cat whiskers passed and whom I cradled for 4 hours without pause, her tears soaking my shirt. This figure was an enigma, her presence heavy with the scent of unfamiliar perfume that clashed with the familiar aroma of hay drifting in from outside. My thoughts drifted back 6 years to the fortnight following Miriam's interment. My Miriam, my spouse of 50 years, her absence, a void that still ached like a phantom limb. Harlan had arrived, his expression a veneer of contrived condolence, the air thick with the floral remnants of the funeral. "Eli, you're mourning," he had uttered, easing documents before me with a smoothness that now seemed sinister. "Permit me to oversee the holdings. It's intricate. For fiscal optimization, it's optimal to transfer the estate into Leora's title, merely a procedural step. It'll safeguard the resource for her prospects." I was dazed adrift in grief's fog. I might have endorsed anything, yet I never did. Leora, though, trusted him. She trusted her spouse, the accountant, had aided her stepfather by fortifying her legacy. She never probed, she never requested the title. She merely began perceiving this home, my home, as hers, the illusion settling like dust on forgotten shelves. But Harlan had deceived. The estate was never in Miriam's name initially. It was in mine. It had perpetually been in mine, acquired and settled in 1978, well before Leora encountered this scavenger. He was aware. And now I recognized his desperation, a frantic energy that pulsed in the room like an approaching thunderstorm. "He's correct, Father," Leora eventually voiced. Her tone was frail taut, like a string about to snap under pressure. We possess aspirations. Harlan is endeavoring to launch his own firm. We can't sustain allowing you to reside here gratis any longer." "Gratis?" I echoed the word, bitter on my tongue, evoking memories of sacrifices long buried. "I nurtured you in this home. I funded your education from this home. When you and Harlan wed and were destitute, I permitted you to dwell here in this home for 3 years sans charge." Harlan emitted that derisive chuckle once more, a sound that grated like gravel underfoot. "That's history, Eli. This is commerce. You're a lessee and a subpar one. You neglect your dues." He inclined forward, his voice dipping to a secretive murmur that carried the chill of impending doom. "Observe, we know you receive your modest pension stipend. It's sufficient to afford a chamber someplace, a cramped chamber. You don't require all this expanse." He motioned around my den, the space where Miriam and I had swayed to old jazz records, where I had charted my children's growth on the door jamb. The marks faded but indelible in my mind. "This is a familial abode," Harlan stated, his grin morphing into a grimace that twisted his features. "And you're not genuinely part of Leora's fresh kin. Not in that manner." That was the phrase, the one that sliced profounder than the monetary demand, a wound that throbbed with raw betrayal, the air suddenly heavy with unspoken accusations. I noticed Leora wince anew. She realized he had overstepped, yet she uttered nothing. Her quietude was her assent, a silence that enveloped the room like a suffocating blanket. I regarded Harlan, then returned to Leora. I permitted the hush to elongate, to permeate the space, to grow ponderous and asphyxiating, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, amplifying the tension like a heartbeat in the void. "So," I articulated, my voice perilously serene, a calm that masked the storm brewing within. "If I don't settle what transpires." Harlan's grin broadened. He believed he had triumphed, his eyes alight with victorious glee. "We expel you lawfully. We'll have the enforcers here so swiftly your mind will whirl." Leora gazed at me, her eyes at last elevating. They were unyielding, devoid of the warmth I once knew. "Father," she expressed, and her voice was no longer frail. It was keen like a blade honed by resentment. "Settle the dues or vacate." I stared at her. My stepdaughter, my cherished girl, vanished into this hardened shell. I grasped the moist rag from the desk. I methodically wiped the area I had been tending, the motion deliberate, a ritual to steady my racing thoughts. I creased the rag and positioned it tidily by the window. Then I nodded, merely once the gesture heavy with finality. "Very well, Leora," I stated. "I comprehend." I strode past them. Harlan bore a countenance of complacent conquest, his posture swelling with pride. Leora merely appeared alleviated that the clash had concluded, her shoulders relaxing, as if a weight had lifted. They assumed I was retreating to my chamber to lament. They presumed I would implore. I ascended the stairs, my footfalls measured and resolute, each step echoing like a countdown in my mind. I entered my bedroom. In the rear of my wardrobe, a modest brown valise awaited. It had been prepared for 7 months, its contents a silent testament to my foresight. I hoisted it, descended the stairs, and proceeded to the front entrance. They remained in the den, already murmuring about their intentions for the property, their voices carrying a greedy undertone that twisted my gut. "Hold on!" Harlan summoned a hint of bewilderment in his tone. "Where are you heading?" I unlatched the front door, the hinges creaking in protest. "You instructed me to vacate," I replied without glancing rearward. "So I'm vacating." I stepped onto the veranda and shut the door behind me, abandoning them in my home, dumbfounded into stillness, the click of the latch resounding like a period at the end of a sentence. They had no conception of what they had just enacted. They had no notion of whom they had just displaced. I lingered on the pathway, the screen door snapping closed behind me. The noise felt conclusive, a door slamming on the past. My compact valise was featherlight in my grasp, yet heavy with implications. I didn't proceed to the train depot. I didn't even advance to the intersection. I stationed myself there on the edge and anticipated the crisp air nipping at my skin, carrying the faint scent of pine from the nearby woods. Precisely 40 seconds later, a sleek silver Mercedes GLS resembling a slab of burnished chrome under the overcast sky glided silently to the curb. The chauffeur, a gentleman named Victor, in a crisp navy ensemble, emerged. He exhibited no astonishment at encountering me in this unassuming rural enclave in my faded trousers. He merely unfastened the rear portal. "Mr. Hawthorne," he intoned, his voice resonant and deferential, cutting through the quiet like a well-honed blade. "Good day." The route was unobstructed. I nodded, the motion deliberate. "Appreciate it, Victor. Let's proceed home." Leora and Harlan were likely still in the den, reveling, perhaps toasting with imagined champagne. They must have presumed I was trudging to a transient refuge or a rundown inn by the outskirts. I observed my former abode, Miriam's sanctuary, recede in the shaded pane, the structure shrinking as if swallowed by the landscape. We traversed out of Willowbrook, away from the modest timber dwellings and rutted lanes. We journeyed directly into the core of Denver, into Cherry Hills, where the edifices are sleek composites and the atmosphere hums with affluent promise. Victor didn't steer into the primary lodge ingress of the Ritz-Carlton. He navigated us to the exclusive subterranean parking. The personnel there recognized me. The attendant inclined his head. "Welcome back, Mr. Hawthorne. Mr. Barrett is slated to arrive at 5. I acknowledged and proceeded directly to the secluded lift, the one necessitating a fob, the one ascending straight to the summit. The lift panels parted directly into my salon, the Apex Suite. The expansive glazing unveiled the entire Denver panorama, a vista that demanded more than Harlan would accrue in 15 existences. This was my authentic domicile, the one Leora had never beheld. The one I procured 25 years prior as a discreet venture, its opulence a stark contrast to the simplicity I had feigned. I deposited my valise on the polished quartz flooring. It appeared absurd beside the authentic Georgia O'Keeffe artwork adorning the wall, its colors vibrant against the neutral tones. My son-in-law presumed I was a retired ranch hand. He presumed my pension was my sole revenue. He presumed I was impoverished. I permitted him to presume that. I allowed all to presume that the deception a shield against the world's grasping hands. When Miriam and I initiated Hawthorne Ventures LLC 45 years ago, she was the visage. She adored the galas, the alliances, the philanthropic soirees. I was the strategist. I remained in the shadows. I scrutinized the agreements. I acquired the terrains. When she departed 6 years hence, I simply persisted in the shadows, the loss, a perpetual shadow, over my decisions. I possess 7 condominium complexes in Lododo, 3 commercial plazas in Arapahoe, and this Apex Suite. I retained the dwelling in Willowbrook because it was Miriam's. It was the ultimate locale. She was genuinely content before the affliction, the memories lingering like ghosts in the halls. And I maintained my existence unadorned for a purpose. I desired Leora to be anchored. I desired her to discover a decent companion, not a fortune seeker. I desired her to cherish diligence to forge something autonomous. I didn't wish my wealth to corrupt her. I now perceive that in my endeavor to shield her, I rendered her fragile. I rendered her modest life one of susceptibility. She misconstrued my modesty for destitution. She misconstrued my forbearance for frailty, and she wed a predator who detected vulnerability in the waters. I approached the sturdy oak bureau overlooking the metropolis, its surface smooth under my fingers. I didn't seize my mobile. I grasped the secure encrypted conduit that only 4 individuals possess the digits to. It chimed once. Barrett. His tone was incisive, efficient. Barrett, it's Eli. It's time. There was a hiatus. Elias, are you certain? She bellowed at me to depart my own abode. Her spouse exacted dues from me. Yes, Barrett, I'm certain. Commence the expulsion procedure for the Willowbrook asset forthwith. I'll be there in 25 minutes. He responded and disconnected. Mr. Barrett was a lanky, astute individual who, attired superiorly to me, he was the sole person Miriam and I entrusted with the comprehensive overview, his loyalty a bedrock in turbulent times. He entered the Apex suite, his demeanor somber, bearing a slender calfskin attaché. He declined a seat. Elias, I'm relieved you contacted, he murmured, his voice subdued, carrying the weight of revelations. It's graver than you anticipated. It's not merely about dues. Your son-in-law is frantic. I awaited. I knew Barrett. He didn't squander verbiage, his precision a double-edged sword. He didn't solely demand dues, Eli. He's vigorously attempted to pilfer the abode. He sought to obtain a $400,000 lien against the Willowbrook asset. He endeavored it at 3 distinct lenders in the past 7 months. I sensed the color ebb from my visage, a chill settling in my veins like frost on glass. How the abode is in my name, the ownership is pristine. Barrett unlatched his attaché and positioned a dossier on my bureau. He's an accountant, Eli. A careless one, but he comprehends the vulnerabilities. He submitted falsified documentation, a counterfeit authorization. He even replicated your signature on this. He advanced a parchment across the desk. It was an initial conservatorship application. My gaze traversed the phrases, owing to progressed age and degenerative cognitive decline, intellectually incapable to administer his own matters, imminent peril to self. He was attempting to have you juridically proclaimed deranged. Barrett articulated, his voice infused with frost. The lenders detected the replicated signature and notified me as the designated representative for the LLC. They rejected the advances, but he's not merely avaricious, Eli. He's a felon, and he is ensnared. I regarded the document in my grasp. Degenerative cognitive decline. The terms throbbed before my eyes. Ebony ink on ivory parchment, a stark indictment that fueled a quiet rage within. This was not a covetous youth seeking gratis lodging. This was a malefactor. He had replicated my signature. He had lodged juridical documents to declare me mentally unfit. He was striving to obliterate me, to transform me into a non-entity, a specter in my own existence, so he could vend my abode and liquidate his obligations. The fervent indignation I experienced in the den dissipated. It was supplanted by something frigid, acute, and utterly lucid, a clarity that sharpened my resolve like a whetstone on steel. Miriam, my departed spouse, always asserted I was most formidable. When I became silent, the quiet a harbinger of calculated action. Harlan had just rendered me profoundly silent. Barrett, I uttered, my voice impeccably balanced. Alteration of strategy. Barrett arched an eyebrow. He was the sole individual I confided in, the man who had overseen the discreet facet of Hawthorne Ventures for 35 years. Elias, we are not displacing them. What? But they just ousted you. They are intruding on your asset. They are jubilating. I know, I replied. I approached the panoramic glazing and surveyed the metropolis below, lights twinkling like distant stars in the encroaching dusk. They believe they've prevailed. They believe the feeble, deranged elder is vanquished, roaming the avenues seeking sanctuary. My son-in-law endeavored to have me juridically eradicated. You don't merely displace a man like that. You don't merely triumph. You must annihilate him. You must strip away everything he believes he possesses. And you must execute it while he's grinning, convinced he's the cleverest individual in the chamber. I pivoted back to Barrett. He thinks I'm a piece in his scheme. He's about to discover I possess the whole arena. Barrett's countenance fractured into a gradual, appreciative grin. He comprehended. This was the Elias Hawthorne he recognized, the strategist emerging from the shadows. What's the maneuver, Elias? He's frantic, I stated, traversing the plush oriental carpet, its thread soft under my shoes. He attempted to secure a $400,000 advance. Why, he's not acquiring a vessel. He's in distress, profound distress. I want you to conduct a comprehensive fiscal audit, obligations, lenders, wagering, ascertain what's pursuing him. Regarded accomplished, Barrett affirmed. Meanwhile, we undertake naught. We permit him to believe he triumphed. He just expelled me. What's his subsequent action? He'll attempt to vend the abode again. He necessitates to. He requires that currency. Barrett furrowed his brow. But the lenders have already signaled him. The ownership is pristine and in your name. He can't vend it. Not lawfully, I said. But he's already perpetrated deceit. He's got the counterfeit conservatorship documents. He won't return to a legitimate lender. He'll approach a dubious cash-exclusive purchaser, someone who won't scrutinize the documentation too meticulously, as long as the cost is appropriate. So what do we execute? We become that purchaser Barrett. We establish a fresh phantom enterprise. We will be the solution to his supplications. We permit him to vend my abode. We permit him to believe he's escaping with the impeccable offense. We will permit him to acquire the currency. And the instant that currency, my currency, reaches his ledger, the instant he endorses that deceptive pact, we possess him. Not just for intrusion, for major deceit, for all. Barrett nodded, a hunter's spark in his gaze. We permit him to construct his own confinement. Precisely, I said. Permit him to believe he's liberated. While I reclined in my apex suite, the vista in my former abode was precisely as I'd envisioned the listening devices Barrett had installed 7 months prior, painting a vivid auditory picture. Harlan was uncorking a flask of inexpensive bourbon, the sort he procured with Leora's plastic. The cap ricocheted off the ceiling, imprinting a minor dent. To us, he bellowed, his eyes frenzied with triumph. To our fresh commencement, to finally being unencumbered. Leora clasped her tumbler, but she appeared apprehensive, her fingers white-knuckled around the glass. Harlan, I sense remorse. He just departed. He's 85. He had his little satchel. Where is he going to go? Harlan draped his arm around her, drawing her near. His grin was oily, slick as oil on water. Darling, don't fret about him. He's an obstinate elder. He made his selection. This is what he desired. What do you mean he didn't desire this? I shouted at him. No. Leora contemplated. Harlan said, his voice shifting to gentle, coercive, the timbre he perpetually employed on her, wrapping around her like a noose. He knows we're the tomorrow. He knows we require this abode. He knows we merit it. He just couldn't compel himself to bestow it to us. So he compelled us to seize it. It's his method of assisting, see. He's liberated from the onus of this vast old abode, and we're liberated to initiate our existences. He desires us to possess this. Leora surveyed the chamber, her gaze alighting on the snapshots of her and me on the mantelpiece, faded images that stirred a pang in my distant heart. But to vend it, it's his home. It's where I matured. It's a stepping stone, Leora, Harlan said impatiently, his patience fraying like worn thread. It's a resource. It's how we attain the genuine abode. The one in Cherry Hills. The one with the vista. The one our offspring merit. He pressed his lips to her brow. I'm managing it. I'm the accountant. Recall, I'll oversee all the tedious documentation. You just concentrate on selecting new decor. We are finally going to be affluent, darling. My poor deluded stepdaughter. She yearned to trust him. She yearned for the vision he was peddling, its allure shimmering like a mirage in the desert. So she grinned a diminutive, feeble grin and sipped the bourbon. All right, she murmured. All right, Harlan. I rely on you. That's my lady, he said, emptying his tumbler. The moment Leora ascended to draw a bath, Harlan's visage transformed. The affectionate spouse vanished. The vermin surfaced, his eyes darting with cunning. He snatched his phone and retreated into my former study, sealing the portal with a soft click that echoed ominously. I knew this because I was eavesdropping. Barrett had positioned surveillance apparatuses in that abode 7 months ago. The day after Harlan first uttered the term dues to Leora, Harlan didn't contact a prominent brokerage. He delved deep into his directory and located a moniker. Vince Predator. Vince, it's Whitaker. Yeah, it's been a while. Listen, that arrangement we discussed, it's on the Willowbrook asset. The elder is finally out. He listened, pacing the room, his foot rapping anxiously on the floor, the rhythm erratic like a trapped animal's heartbeat. No, the ownership is complex, but I'm the exclusive overseer. I have the documents, complete authorization. It's pristine, don't concern about it. I just need a cash purchaser, someone who doesn't pose numerous inquiries. He paused. How much, Vince? You know the region. It's ripe for redevelopment. The terrain alone is valued at $900,000. The structure is sturdy frame, I know. I know it's antiquated. Look, I'm not covetous. I'll accept $950,000. I nearly chuckled. My abode was worth $1.3 million, but Harlan was hasty, his desperation palpable even through the audio. I heard Vince chortle on the opposite end. $950,000 cash for an ownership that's complex. You're fantasizing. I'll offer you $940,000. That's my ultimate proposal. My purchaser is reliable. Agreed, Harlan said instantaneously. $940,000. Dispatch me the rendezvous particulars. He disconnected and thrust his fist skyward. He believed he'd just secured nearly $1 million. Leora descended in her dressing gown. Who was that dear? Harlan kissed her a deceiver's caress. Just the lender sorting the specifics. Positive news. I think I located a purchaser. It's a challenging market, but I think I can secure us $450,000 for this locale. Leora's eyes expanded. $450,000? Oh heavens! Harlan, that's incredible. We'll be wealthy. I told you, darling, he said, embracing her firmly. I'll oversee everything. I halted the recording. He's deceiving her, I said to Barrett. He's going to pilfer nearly $500,000 from his own spouse. Barrett merely shook his head. He's not just a felon, Elias. He's a fool. He doesn't know who he's contending with. No, he doesn't, I affirmed. Barrett established the enterprise, procure the funds. We're going to acquire my abode back. I reclined in my chair in the Apex suite, the Denver panorama extending before me, a realm of alloy and luminescence. Summit Denver Holdings, LLC, I said, savoring the title. It resonated substantial, anonymous, impeccable. Barrett was swift. By the subsequent dawn, the LLC was wholly registered, legally constituted entity, financed with $1.2 million, transferred from one of my primary reservoirs. It was a phantom crafted for one objective: to procure my own abode. Harlan won't suspect a thing, Barrett said over tea, the steam rising like whispers of conspiracy. He had arrived at the Apex suite to conclude the scheme. The LLC lists a governance firm in Wyoming as its overseer. It's entirely untraceable. He sipped his tea. And I have the purchaser. Who? I queried. A man named Desmond. He's one of my premier investigators ex-NSA. He appears like inherited wealth and sounds disinterested by everything. He's the ideal cash purchaser. He won't alarm Harlan. He'll just appear impatient, which will compel Harlan to hasten. Excellent, I said. The frigid, acute sensation returned a focus that sharpened my senses. Let him hasten. Let him dash right into it. We didn't have to linger long. Harlan's Predator associate Vince arranged the rendezvous for the very next day. A Friday they were convening at an ownership bureau in Low-Do, a neutral venue. Of course, Barrett possessed the ownership bureau too through another reservoir company. The entire crew, the systems, the lady at the reception, all component of the snare. Harlan was a rodent ambling into a labyrinth he believed he had erected. I wasn't there corporeally, but I was attendant. Barrett had the whole assembly chamber equipped for sound and visual. I sat in my study at the Apex suite observing a real-time transmission on a broad display. It felt like viewing a profoundly melancholic, profoundly foreseeable film, the pixels conveying every nuance of deception. Harlan entered first. He was donning a fresh ensemble, a gaudy metallic blue affair I had never witnessed. He was attempting to resemble a man who managed million-dollar transactions daily. He resembled a youngster playing masquerade in his father's attire, the fabric ill-fitting and shiny under the lights. Then Mr. Desmond Barrett's operative entered. He was flawless. He wore a costly cotton blouse, no neckwear, and an impatient expression that masked keen observation. He looked like he had just disembarked from a private jet. He didn't even glance at Harlan. He just seated and drummed his fingers on the table, the rhythm impatient and rhythmic. Harlan was anxious. I could see a small droplet of perspiration on his brow glistening under the fluorescent glow. Mr. Desmond, appreciate your attendance. As you can observe, this is a prime asset. Desmond interrupted him. His voice was gravelly bored. Whitaker, correct, spare the promotion. I viewed the asset. I don't care about the allure. I care about the ownership. Is it pristine, or are we squandering time? Harlan laughed, that shrill, nervous cackle. I detested a sound that echoed hollowly. Oh, it's pristine. Absolutely. As I elucidated to Vince, I am the exclusive overseer. I have complete authorization. My stepfather-in-law, sadly, his intellect is just, it's not what it used to be. He's in a residence. I am administering all his matters. I watched him articulate it. I watched him fabricate slandering me, effacing me, depicting me as a decrepit, deranged fool, the words hanging in the air like poison. So he's unfit, legally? Desmond inquired, cutting to the core. Yes, Harlan falsified. The tribunal has designated me trustee. I have the endorsed conservatorship documents right here submitted and authenticated. He delved into his attaché, and there it was, the replicated document. The one he had attempted to utilize at the lender. He advanced it across the table. That was it. That was the instant. The act of presenting that replicated document in the execution of a transaction was the major offense. Barrett, seated in the adjacent chamber, merely nodded once at his own concealed lens. Desmond scarcely glanced at it. Whatever, as long as the ownership firm validates it. The ownership representative, another of Barrett's staff, a very professional-appearing lady, entered. Gentlemen, the documentation is prepared for endorsements. Mr. Whitaker, as you are the vendor acting as trustee for Elias Hawthorne, you will endorse here, here, and here. And Mr. Desmond, as the acquiring agent for Summit LLC, you will endorse here. I observed the display. I observed Harlan grasp the pen. He had this minuscule smile on his face, a smile of pure foolish arrogance that twisted my stomach. He believed he was a prodigy. He believed he was executing the grandest coup of his existence. He endorsed his name with a flourish, vending my $1.3 million abode for $940,000. The ownership representative was highly proficient. The electronic transfer for $940,000 has been commenced to the holding ledger you supplied Mr. Whitaker. You should see it processed by day's end. Harlan practically sprinted from the bureau. He didn't even await the lift. I observed him on my display as he entered his vehicle, his hands quivering like leaves in a gale. He didn't drive home. He sat in the parking structure, extracted his portable computer, and linked it to his device. He couldn't delay. We observed thanks to the program Barrett had on his gadgets as he accessed the holding ledger. The currency was there, $940,000. He didn't waver. He didn't even inhale. He promptly executed a transfer not to his and Leora's shared ledger to an extraterritorial ledger in the Bahamas, amount $250,000. He settled his wagerer. Then he executed another transfer, $60,000, to another ledger, then another $40,000. He was liquidating his obligations one by one within moments of the transaction. After he had skimmed $350,000 off the top, he transferred $450,000 into his shared checking ledger with Leora. The remainder, about $240,000, he left in the holding ledger, probably to relocate subsequently. Then he contacted Leora. I heard her voice luminous and optimistic. Harlan, did it succeed? Did we vend the abode? It's accomplished, darling, he exclaimed. $450,000. It's in our ledger right now. We're affluent. I heard her shriek with delight. Oh, heavens, Harlan, you accomplished it. You're extraordinary. I told you I'd oversee you, he said, his voice oozing with spurious pride. But listen, darling, the lender is a bit peculiar about such a substantial transfer. They've imposed a procedural freeze on the funds just for a few days, so don't attempt to expend anything yet, but it's there. We're secure. He was deceiving her. He was deceiving everyone, the lies piling like debts unpaid. I deactivated the display. I couldn't observe anymore. The image of my stepdaughter jubilating, thanking the very man who was demolishing her existence, was too much to bear a visceral ache that clawed at my chest. The secure line on my desk chimed. It was Barrett from the chamber adjacent to where Harlan had just endorsed his life away. His voice was composed, professional, and utterly conclusive. We secured him Elias. I know Barrett. I witnessed it all. He presented the replicated conservatorship documents to facilitate a transaction. He endorsed the contract as a false trustee. He accepted the payment, and then he promptly relocated the funds across boundaries to liquidate illicit wagering obligations. That's not just deceit. That's electronic deceit. He's facing 25 years in a national penitentiary. I inhaled deeply, the air cool and filtered in the suite. Excellent. Permit him. He believes the currency is frozen for a few days. Yes, Barrett said. Grant him 1 week, I said. Let him have 1 week of thinking he's the sovereign of the realm. Let him slumber soundly for 7 nights. Then on the 8th day dispatch the enforcers. I granted Harlan 7 days. 7 days to exist like a monarch. For those days, he was the individual he always aspired to be. I knew, because I had Barrett monitor his fresh expenditures, the data streaming in like evidence in a trial. The initial thing he did was purchase a $3,000 timepiece. Then he began escorting Leora to eateries I knew they couldn't finance, settling in currency. He was haughty. He was boisterous. He was, for the first time in his existence, a victor, his laughter echoing in reports like hollow triumphs. Leora was uneasy. She kept inquiring him about the currency. Dear, she'd query, her voice captured on the still operational surveillance apparatuses. When is the lender going to release the freeze on the $450,000 my plastic bill is pending? Harlan would chortle, that oily, patronizing chortle. Darling, unwind. Substantial currency moves leisurely. It's procedural. Trust me, I'm an accountant. I know how these matters function. Now, which shade Portia should we acquire, silver or graphite? He had liquidated his wagering obligations. He had $240,000 still residing in that extraterritorial ledger. He had $450,000 in the shared ledger that he told Leora was immobilized. He felt invulnerable. He felt like a deity, his hubris a balloon inflating toward burst. Then came the 8th day, a Monday. I was in the Apex suite perusing the Financial Times when Barrett sent me a straightforward message. They're en route. Back in Willowbrook, at my former abode, Leora was in the parlor encircled by home design periodicals selecting furnishings for the Cherry Hills villa. Harlan had vowed her dreams fragile as paper. Harlan was on my veranda, indulging in a costly cigar. A vehicle he couldn't have financed 2 weeks prior. A charcoal gray county conveyance pulled up to the edge. It wasn't a law enforcement vehicle. It was a Arapahoe County enforcer's car. 2 officers in official vests emerged clutching a notepad. Harlan narrowed his eyes at them, irritated. He thought they were vendors, or perhaps someone seeking me. He took a long, haughty draw of his cigar, the smoke curling lazily in the air. Can I assist you, sirs? The lead enforcer. A burly man who looked like he had zero tolerance didn't grin. Are you Harlan Whitaker? Harlan's haughtiness wavered just a bit, a crack in the facade. I am. What's this concerning? Sir, we have a writ of occupancy for this asset. Harlan laughed, a short, nervous yelp that betrayed his unease. A writ of what? You mean an expulsion for who the old lessee Eli Hawthorne? He waved his cigar dismissively, ash scattering like confetti of defeat. He's departed. Left 2 weeks ago. He's not my issue. We own this abode. The enforcer looked at his paper, then back at Harlan. His voice was monotone, unyielding. No, sir. The writ of occupancy is for you and for anyone else dwelling at this address. The cigar smoke lingered in the air, stagnant. That's ludicrous. That's unfeasible. This abode belongs to my wife, Leora Whitaker. Leora heard the voices and came to the portal, the periodical still in her grasp. Harlan, dear, what's amiss? The enforcer looked past Harlan to Leora, then back again. Ma'am, according to the title filed with the county on November 4th, this asset was legally vended by its trustee, Mr. Harlan Whitaker, to the new proprietors. He donned his spectacles to read the file. Summit Denver Holdings, LLC. They are the new legal proprietors. You are currently intruding. We are serving you this 7-day notice to evacuate the premises. Leora's periodical slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor like a fallen leaf. Summit, what is he talking about? Trustee sold. I thought the currency was frozen. You said $450,000. Harlan's face was the hue of cinders drained of life. This is an error, he yelled, his voice suddenly shrill. This is deceit. Someone pilfered my identity. I am an accountant. I know my privileges. The enforcer was utterly unmoved. He had witnessed this 1,000 times, his expression a mask of indifference. That's a civil affair, sir. You'll have to address that with your counsel. Our duty is to serve the notice. He tore the sheet from his notepad and affixed the vivid fluorescent yellow notice right onto my old front portal. 7 days, sir. Have a pleasant day. The enforcers returned to their conveyance and drove away. Leora and Harlan just stood there, staring at the yellow paper, its color glaring like a warning beacon. Then Leora turned on him, her eyes blazing with dawning realization. Harlan, what was that? What is Summit Holdings? You said the lender. You said $450,000. It's an error. It's an administrative blunder, that's all. Harlan was panting, fumbling for his phone. Vince, I'll contact Vince. That cursed predator, he must have botched the documentation. He'll rectify this. His hands were quaking so severely he could barely unlock his phone. He scrolled to Vince Predator. He pressed call and put the phone to his ear, his eyes wide with mounting dread. I could imagine the sound he was hearing, the sound I had Barrett arrange an hour ago. Beep, beep, beep. We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and try again. No. Harlan whispered, his voice cracking like thin ice. He hung up. He dialed again frantically. The number you have dialed is not in service. He stumbled back, his hands trembling uncontrollably. No, 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 no. He scrolled through his call log. Desmond, the purchaser. I'll contact Desmond. He's a real person. I met him. I'll contact him. He dialed the number for Mr. Desmond. We're sorry. The number you have dialed is not in service. Harlan Whitaker dropped his phone. It clattered onto the veranda. He staggered back against the veranda railing, his eyes fixed on the yellow sticker on the door. He looked at Leora, his face a mask of pure primal terror that twisted his features into something unrecognizable. It wasn't an error. The purchaser was a phantom. The ownership bureau was a phantom. Vince was vanished. He had been outmaneuvered. He had been surgically, perfectly, and completely outmaneuvered, the realization crashing over him like a wave in a storm. Harlan! Leora screamed, shaking him violently. You lied to me! Where is the currency? Where is the $940,000? What did you do? But Harlan wasn't looking at her. He was looking out at the street, his eyes wide with a horror that had nothing to do with his wife, a dread that seeped into his bones. They knew, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Who knew? Leora sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Him! Harlan whispered, his voice fracturing like glass. The elder. It was him. He acquired the abode. Leora's mind couldn't bridge the gap. It was inconceivable. Her stepfather was a poor, deranged elder. But then where did he go? Who was that man in the silver Mercedes? She dashed inside, shoving past her husband. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it, spilling its contents on the floor with a chaotic clatter. She found her phone, her fingers fumbling with the screen like numb appendages. She scrolled past father, the number she had been ignoring for months. She scrolled down, down, down to a number she hadn't dialed in years, a number from a phone I'd had long ago. It was labeled Father Old Number. She hit call, praying it would connect, having no idea she was about to reach my secure line in the Apex suite. The encrypted line on my desk, the one I had not heard ring in 6 years, suddenly illuminated. The display just showed private caller. I let it ring thrice. I took a sip of water, the cool liquid steadying my resolve. Then I pressed the speakerphone button. Hello! The sound that came through the speaker was not a voice. It was a wail, a raw, bestial cry of pure terror that echoed in the room like a wounded animal. Father, Father! Oh heavens, Father, are you there? I waited. I let her panic flood the space, the sobs building like a crescendo. I'm here, Leora. You're shrieking. Father, you have to aid us. You have to return home. There are men here, enforcers. They placed a sticker on the portal. They said the abode is vended. They said we have to vacate. We have 7 days. 7 days. She was sobbing, gasping for air, her words tumbling over each other in a frantic rush. Harlan tried to contact the purchasers, but the numbers are all disconnected. He says it's an error that someone pilfered his identity. Father, please, you have to contact the authorities. You have to tell them it's your abode. I looked out the window of the Apex suite down at the Denver panorama. It was a beautiful, crisp day, the sun glinting off distant peaks. But Leora, I said, my voice perfectly calm, a still pond amid her turmoil. It's not my abode. Not anymore. What are you talking about? Of course it's your abode. No, I said, keeping my voice even measured. I'm the old lessee. Remember, you and Harlan own it. That's what you said. That's what Harlan told the enforcers. I'm just the elder who was residing there gratis. I'm not involved. Father, cease it, she screamed, her voice raw with desperation. This isn't a jest. We're going to be destitute. Harlan is having a panic episode. I need you to rectify this. Contact them and tell them. Tell them it's an error. I leaned back in my supple leather chair, the material creaking softly. Rectify what, Leora? I don't reside there. I'm not the proprietor. I'm not the vendor. I'm just the burden you two were so concerned about. Why are you contacting me? Because it's you. It's your abode. You have to halt them from taking it. No, Leora. I said I can't. You see, I'm not deranged. I'm not even close. You told me to vacate, so I vacated. I found another place to reside. You and Harlan are the proprietors now. It's your predicament. You're the accountant's spouse. I'm sure he can manage it. But he can't, she wailed, her voice breaking like waves on rocks. He says they were phantoms. He says he thinks he was framed. Framed? I asked, feigning mild surprise. By who? By the poor deranged elder you kicked out onto the avenue. How could I possibly do something like that? There was a long pause, just her ragged breathing, labored and uneven. The gears were turning in her head, but they were grinding slow and full of rust, clogged with denial. She couldn't assemble the fragments. She couldn't believe her poor old stepfather could be anything but a victim, the illusion shattering slowly. Father, what did you do? Her voice was a whisper, faint and trembling. Me, I did exactly what you told me to do. I left. I stepped back and I watched your husband, the brilliant accountant, take his next step, the step he was planning all along. What are you talking about? His plan. You really didn't know, did you? I almost felt a twinge of pity for her. Almost, but the memory of her betrayal quelled it. Leora Harlan didn't tell you the abode was in your name. He lied to you. He lied to you 6 years ago when Miriam died. He never filed any papers to transfer the title. He couldn't because the abode was always in my name. The silence on the other end was absolute, profound as a chasm. I could hear the distant sound of a truck horn passing her on the lane, probably rattling the windows of my abode with its rumble. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. That's not true. He showed me. He said it was for taxes. He lied, I said, cutting her off, my voice like tempered steel, unyielding. He's been lying to you since the day you met him. He needed you to believe it was your abode so you would support him when he kicked me out. So you would feel justified. He used you, Leora. He used you as a shield to get to me. No. Harlan loves me. Harlan loves Currency Leora. And he was frantic. He needed to vend my abode, so he replicated my signature. He created fake legal documents claiming I was mentally unfit, claiming he was my legal conservator. He took those fake papers and he vended my abode to the first cash purchaser he could find. He vended it, she stammered, her words halting. But the currency, he said $450,000. He said it was frozen. I let out a short, cold laugh, a sound that echoed strangely in the opulent room, devoid of mirth. $450,000. Is that what he told you? Oh, Leora, you really have no idea who you married, do you? What? What do you mean? The sale price wasn't $450,000, Leora. The sale price was $940,000, cash. 900. She couldn't even say the number fully, her voice trailing off. But where is it? Who bought it? He already spent almost $40,000 of it paying off his gambling debts. Leora, debts he never told you about. He was going to steal nearly $500,000 from you, his own wife, after he stole the abode from me. Oh heavens, she whispered. Oh heavens, who bought it? Who has the abode? Who did he vend it to? I leaned forward in my chair. I wanted to be sure the speakerphone captured every single word, each syllable deliberate. He vended it to a company called Summit Denver Holdings Leora, a very private LLC, a company that I happen to own. The line went dead. Not a whisper, not a sob, just silence, abrupt and final. She had hung up. Or maybe she had just dropped the phone, the device clattering to the floor. That's right, Leora, I said to the empty room, the words hanging in the air. I bought my own abode. I have the currency, I have the title, and I am the one evicting you. I hung up the phone. I looked at the clock, its hands ticking inexorably. They had 7 days, 6 days, 23 hours, and about 59 minutes left. I wasn't in the abode when the second act of this tragedy commenced, but I heard it. I heard it all. Barrett had ensured the surveillance apparatuses were top tier, their clarity unflinching. I heard the sound of the phone dropping onto the hardwood floor with a thud. I heard Harlan, still on the veranda, stammer, Leora? Leora? Darling, what is it? What did he say? He walked inside. He saw Leora, pale as a ghost, staring at the phone on the floor as if it were a venomous snake. Leora, he's lying. He's a mad elder. He's trying to frighten us. She didn't look at him. She just whispered, $940,000. He's lying, Harlan shouted, his voice cracking with panic. It was $450,000. The contract. Where is the contract, Harlan? Her voice was dead flat, emotionless as a void. Show me. Show me the contract you endorsed. It's with the ownership company. They retained the originals, darling. You know that. He's playing a game. A game? She repeated, her tone hollow. She walked like a somnambulist past him toward my old study, the room he had appropriated as his home office, her steps mechanical. Leora, what are you doing? Don't. We need to unite on this. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight. She ripped her arm away from him, her eyes flashing with a cold fire I had never seen in her, a spark of awakening fury. Don't you touch me, she hissed, the words venomous. She went straight to his desk. She started pulling open drawers with forceful yanks. Leora, halt. That's my private client information. You can't. Where is it, Harlan? She screamed, throwing files onto the floor in a cascade of paper. Where is the currency? Where are the bank statements? You said it was frozen, so show me the frozen ledger. It's online. It's all digital. I can't. She wasn't listening. She went to his attaché, the one he always kept, locked its surface scuffed from use. She didn't ask for the code. She walked to the hearth, grabbed the heavy brass poker, and smashed the lock. Once, twice, the lock shattered with a metallic crack. Leora! He screamed, part rage, part terror, his voice echoing off the walls. She dumped the contents onto the floor papers, scattering like leaves in autumn wind. And there, in a simple beige envelope, was a bank statement. A statement for a ledger Leora had never seen. A ledger at a bank in the Bahamas. She unfolded it. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She read the first line. Ledger balance $240,000. She looked at him, her eyes accusatory. Harlan, what is this? It's a savings scheme, darling, for us, for our future. It's complicated. She kept reading. She saw the recent transaction history. She saw the deposit, $940,000, and right below it, the outgoing transfers. Harlan, she whispered, her voice trembling with betrayal. What is BA? What is this $250,000 payment? What is Luck Vegas wire transfer $60,000? Harlan, what is this? He didn't answer. He just sagged against the wall, his face white as chalk, his new expensive ensemble suddenly looking cheap and oversized, ill-fitting on his deflating frame. It's gambling, isn't it? She said, the poker still in her hand, gripped like a weapon. You're a gambler. He slid down the wall and sat on the floor, his head in his hands a picture of defeat. It was a bad streak, he whimpered, his voice pathetic. Just a bad streak. I had a sure bet. I was going to double it. I was going to win it all back. I was going to put it all in our ledger. Leora, I swear I was going to surprise you. She looked at him, this pathetic, whimpering creature on the floor of her stepfather's study, the room now tainted with his presence. You vended my stepfather's abode to pay for gambling. He owed me. The elder owed me for all the years I endured him, for all the years I cared for you. Leora just dropped the bank statement. She backed out of the room, her movements slow, deliberate. She walked to the den, found her phone, and dialed my number again. I answered on the first ring. This time it wasn't a scream, it was a sob. A deep, agonizing sound that came from the very depths of her soul, raw and unfiltered. Father, oh heavens, Father, I'm here. Leora, it's all true. It's worse. He's a gambler. Father, he's a degenerate. He lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. He paid a casino. Father, he paid a casino with your abode. She was choking on the words, her breaths ragged. He's not the man I married. He's a monster. He's been lying to me. He's been lying about everything. He's in debt. He's ruined us. He ruined me. I let her cry. I let her feel the full weight of the truth she had refused to see for 11 years, the denial crumbling like dry earth. The truth her mother Miriam had seen the first day she met him, her intuition sharp as ever. He didn't just ruin you, Leora, I said, my voice cutting through her sobs like a knife through fog. He ruined everyone he touched. What? What do you mean? I know all about his debts, Leora. I know about the $180,000 he owed the bookies. I know why he was so desperate to vend the abode. How could you possibly know that? Because Barrett and I have been investigating your husband for the last 7 months, Leora. Ever since he first tried to get that fake authorization, the gambling debts. That's not even his biggest problem today. There was a sniffle on the other end, muffled and broken. What? What's worse than that? I took a sip of my water, the glass cool against my lips. The $90,000 he misappropriated from his own accounting firm, Leora. The currency he pilfered from the partner's trust ledger. The ledger for the Thompson inheritance. The What A fund for 3 orphan siblings, Leora. He pilfered from orphans. I made a phone call this morning just before the enforcers arrived. I called the senior partners at his firm. I told them to check the books for that specific ledger. I told them their junior partner, the man who just vended $1 million abode for cash, was a common thief. I didn't have to imagine the next part. Barrett had an investigator positioned in the lobby of Harlan's firm downtown. The reports detailed and unflinching. Harlan Whitaker, still pale and sweating from his confrontation with Leora, burst through the doors of his accounting firm. He was probably planning to access his ledgers to relocate the rest of the currency to flee. He jammed his key card into the elevator slot. It beeped. Red light. Access denied. He tried again. Red light. Harlan. He froze, his body stiffening. He turned around. Mr. Caldwell, the senior partner, was standing in the lobby. With him were 2 men in dark suits I knew were off-duty law enforcement officers working security, their presence imposing. Mr. Caldwell, Harlan stammered, his voice faltering. My card, it's not functioning. Caldwell didn't smile. His face was like granite, unyielding. We need to converse, Harlan, in the primary assembly room now. Leave your attaché and your phone with security. Harlan looked at the security guards. He looked at Caldwell's cold, dead eyes, the gaze piercing. He knew it was over. Every single thread he had been juggling had just been severed all at once, the collapse inevitable. 7 days. That's what the law mandates. 7 days for a lessee to evacuate. I gave them 9 days, but Harlan and Leora, in their panic and arrogance, must have tried to file a counterclaim. It was dismissed immediately, of course. The replicated documents, the electronic deceit. They had no legal footing. So today was the day. It was overcast and chilly for a Denver morning. A damp frost was in the air, clinging to everything like regret. I had Barrett arrange for the enforcers to arrive at 10 a.m. sharp. When I arrived, they were already midway done. It was a brutal, impersonal process, the air filled with the grunts of labor and the thud of items. 2 sturdy men in Arapahoe County vests carrying out furniture. Not my furniture, their furniture. The cheap laminate racks Harlan had bought. The oversized gray modular couch Leora thought was so stylish. They carried it all out and placed it on the front lawn right on the damp sod. It was a yard sale of a ruined life, pathetic and exposed. Leora was there. She wasn't shrieking anymore. She was sitting on the curb, the exact spot where I had waited for my car 9 days ago. She was wearing the same clothes she'd had on 3 days ago, her hair disheveled, her face pallid and swollen from crying, the cold seeping into her bones. She was just watching her life being dismantled piece by piece, a couch, a high-definition screen, boxes of household wares, a lamp. It all looked so cheap, so transient, sitting out there on the lawn under the gray sky. She had nothing. Harlan was in a detention cell downtown, bail denied. The misappropriation charge from his firm was the least of his worries. The national electronic deceit charges were what held him ironclad. He couldn't assist her. His parents, I'd heard, weren't accepting her calls. She was completely, utterly isolated, a lone figure in the chill. She was exactly where her greed had placed her, the consequence stark and unforgiving. She looked up as my car approached. She probably thought it was another journalist. The story of Harlan's arrest, the misappropriating accountant, had hit the local broadcasts. But it wasn't a news van. It was a 2040 Bentley Flying Spur, profound obsidian black, silent as a shadow on electric drive. It didn't roar, it whispered. It pulled to a silent stop on the street right next to her pile of belongings, the engine humming faintly. Leora shielded her eyes, confused, the light catching her tear-streaked face. She didn't know anyone who owned a car like this, its luxury alien to her world. The back door opened. My left shoe hit the pavement, a $6,000 hand-stitched dark leather Santoni shoe. I stepped out. I wasn't wearing my old trousers and a plaid shirt. I was wearing a slate gray bespoke suit. I adjusted my cuffs, the platinum of my Vacheron Constantin watch, catching the feeble morning light with a subtle gleam. I was not the man she had evicted. I was not the man she had called a burden. Mr. Barrett stepped out of the passenger side, equally impeccable, holding his calfskin attaché, his presence a pillar of authority. He walked around the car to stand beside me. I looked at the scene, the enforcers, the furniture, my stepdaughter sitting on the curb like a displaced wanderer. I felt nothing, just a cold final sense of closure, the chapter ending with inexorable finality. Leora stood up. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Her lips parting in silent shock. She looked at me, at the car, at Barrett, then back at me. Her brain was trying to reconcile 2 images that did not coexist, the poor deranged elder and the man standing before her, commanding and composed. "Father." Her voice was a cracked whisper, barely audible over the wind. "What? What is this? Whose car is this? Why are you attired like that?" "It's my car, Leora," I said. My voice was calm, clear, carrying in the morning air like a verdict. "I've had it for 18 months. I just keep it at the Apex Suite garage." The Apex Suite," she stammered, her words stumbling. "Yes, the one at the Ritz-Carlton, where I've been residing since you kicked me out of my abode." I don't comprehend," she whispered, her eyes wide with a terror that was deeper than just being destitute. It was the terror of reality itself shifting beneath her feet, foundations crumbling. I know you don't, I said. You never did. You saw a simple elder. You saw a small abode. You saw a target. You never bothered to look deeper. You never bothered to ask a single question about me, about your mother, about our lives. I took a step closer, the enforcers pausing their work, watching us with detached interest. Your mother and I, we didn't just labor, Lyora. We built Hawthorne Ventures LLC, the company I founded the year you came into our lives, the company that owns this. I gestured to Barrett. Barrett stepped forward and opened his attaché with a soft snap. Miss Hawthorne, he said, his voice void of all emotion clinical. Your stepfather's portfolio includes 7 multi-residential condominium complexes in Lodo, 3 commercial retail centers in Arapahoe County, a controlling interest in a distribution enterprise at the port, and the Apex residence at the Ritz-Carlton. Total estimated value $92 million. Lyora just shook her head, as if she could deny the words, her denial futile. No, you worked as a ranch hand. That was a fabrication I told you when you were 12, I said. A fabrication I told to protect you. I wanted you to grow up normal. I wanted you to be humble. I wanted you to value hard work, not inheritance. Your mother Miriam, she was afraid our wealth would make you soft. She was afraid it would attract men like Harlan Whitaker. I paused, letting the words sink in. It seems she was right to be afraid. I kept that abode in Willowbrook for her. I stayed there living simply for you, to teach you value, to see if you could build something of your own without my currency turning you into what you became. But you got soft anyway. You married a weak, greedy man. You looked at my humility and you called it poverty. You looked at my patience and you called it weakness. I looked her dead in the eyes, unwavering. The final enforcer walked out of the abode, locking the door with a new key, the click resounding. He handed the key to Barrett, who placed it in his attaché with finality. You stood in my den, Lyora, my den in the abode I paid for, and you screamed at me. Settle the dues or vacate. You made your choice. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I did exactly what you said. I vacated. I gestured to the pile of furniture on the wet sod, and now you're on the avenue. She shivered, the damp morning cold seeping through her thin clothes like insidious fingers. I watched her. She had been humiliated. She had been exposed. She was now officially destitute, the reality biting. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling so badly she could barely unlock it. The screen smudged. I saw her tap the rideshare app. She stared at the screen, her face contorted in confusion, then panic. Payment method declined. She frantically typed, trying another card. Declined. She tried a third. Declined. She started breathing fast, hyperventilating, her chest heaving. She scrolled through her contacts and tried to call a lodge, probably one of the luxurious ones she and Harlan favored. A room, yes, Whitaker. Lyora Whitaker. Her voice was desperate pleading. What do you mean the card isn't? No. Run it again. It's a shared ledger with my husband. It's fine. I knew what the attendant on the other end was telling her. The ledgers were not fine. They were frozen, locked tight. She threw her phone onto the couch that sat awkwardly on the sod. It bounced onto a cushion with a soft thump. She looked at her purse, desperate, then at me, her eyes pleading. Mr. Barrett, who had been standing silently by the Bentley, stepped forward. He walked past me across the lawn until he was standing over her. His shadow fell across her as she sat on the curb, elongated in the dim light. Miss Hawthorne, he said. His voice was not kind. It was not cruel. It was the voice of pure cold law, impartial. I believe I can save you some time. She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen, lost in bewilderment. Who are you? My name is Mr. Barrett. I am Mr. Hawthorne's legal counsel. He gestured to her phone. I'm afraid your payment methods will not work. Not today, not tomorrow, and perhaps not for a very long time. It's you. She shrieked, scrambling to her feet and pointing at me with a shaking finger. You did this! You froze my ledgers! That's my currency. That's Harlan's currency. You can't just take my currency. Barrett's voice cut through her hysteria like a scalpel. There is no Harlan's currency, Miss Hawthorne. There's only pilfered currency. And as you were wed and the ledgers were shared, your name is now inextricably linked to several ongoing national investigations. Her face went blank, drained. What? No, I didn't do anything. He's the one who. You were complicit in his attempt to vend an asset that was not yours. Barrett continued, his voice like a judge pronouncing sentence steady. Your name is on the shared ledger where he deposited $450,000 obtained through electronic deceit. And most importantly, your name is on the fraudulent conservatorship application he filed against your stepfather, claiming he was mentally unfit. In the eyes of the law, Miss Hawthorne, you are not a victim. You are an accomplice. The word accomplice hit her. It was a physical blow, staggering her. She staggered back, her balance faltering. She looked at her hands as if she could see restraints on them, then at me, her eyes wide with realization. The fight evaporated. The arrogance, the anger, all of it just drained away like water down a drain. She crumpled. She scrambled across the lawn, stumbling on the uneven sod, and grabbed the lapels of my suit. Her hands were dirty from the curb, leaving smudges on the fine fabric. "Father, please," she sobbed, her voice breaking with desperation. "Please, you can't do this. I have nothing. He took everything. I have no currency. I have nowhere to go. Please, Father. I'm your stepdaughter. I'm your stepdaughter. You can't just leave me on the avenue, please." She was begging. The same woman who had screamed, "Vacate," was now begging to be let back in her pleas, raw and unfiltered. I looked down at her hands on my suit. They were trembling uncontrollably. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I didn't pat her head. I just looked at her, my face like stone, impassive. Slowly, deliberately, I reached up and peeled her fingers off my lapel, one by one, the motion methodical. I brushed the spot she had touched as if brushing off a piece of lint, dismissive. "You're right," I said. "You have nothing, but that's not entirely true." She looked up, confused, tears and mucus streaming down her face in rivulets. "What?" I pointed to her left hand. "You still have that, the ring, the one you were always so proud of. What did you tell me? It was 4 carats impeccable." She looked down at her engagement ring. The diamond caught the gray morning light, sparkling mockingly. A flicker of hope crossed her face. She could vend it. It was worth thousands, a lifeline glimmering. "You know Liora," I said, my voice quiet, measured. "I never understood that ring." "Harlan was broke when he met you. He was a junior associate making $70,000 a year. How could he afford a $60,000 ring?" She stammered. He said it was family currency, an inheritance from his aunt. Harlan's aunt died with nothing but debt. Leora, he didn't have any family currency, but his accounting firm did. Do you remember when I told you he pilfered $90,000 from the Thompson inheritance, the trust fund for the orphans? She stared at me, her eyes wide, unblinking, her breath held. She wasn't breathing, suspended in horror. "He pilfered that $90,000 before he proposed to you, Leora. That wasn't a recent development. That was his entry fee. That's how he convinced you he was a man of means." I let the silence hang in the cold air, heavy and accusatory. I let her connect the two facts, the puzzle pieces clicking with dreadful clarity. "You're not wearing a symbol of his love, Leora," I said, my voice barely a whisper, intimate yet cutting. "You're wearing the Thompson Children's Education Fund on your finger. You're wearing pilfered currency. You're wearing blood currency from orphans." She looked at the ring on her hand as if it were a serpent, venomous and coiled. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, panicked. She tried to pull it off her fingers, fumbling, scratching at her own skin with frantic nails. "No, no, no, he wouldn't. He wouldn't." "He would. He did. And you've been displaying it at everyone for 11 years, telling them how much he loved you." She finally ripped the ring off her finger. It tore a small piece of skin with it, a bead of blood welling up. She looked at this glittering, cursed object in her palm. She screamed a short, choked sound and hurled it. The ring flew across the pavement and disappeared into the storm drain with a faint plink. And then she doubled over right there on the sidewalk and was violently, horribly sick all over the wet sod, her body heaving with revulsion. She collapsed onto her knees, sobbing, heaving, having truly finally lost every single thing she thought defined her. The emptiness, profound. I watched her. I just stood there and watched my stepdaughter, My only kin kneeling in the damp cold sod, retching until there was nothing left to expel her body racked with spasms. She was broken utterly and completely shattered beyond immediate repair. The enforcers had finished their work. The last of her cheap, flashy furniture was sitting on the lawn, a pathetic monument to a life built on illusions exposed to the elements. The truck pulled away from the curb with a rumble. The spectacle was over the curtain fallen. Barrett stood beside me, silent, impassive as a statue. He knew this part was mine personal. Leora was sobbing now, but they were the dry, racking sobs of someone who has nothing left. Hollow echoes. She had lost her husband. She had lost her fantasy of $1 million windfall. She had lost her home, and she had just lost the last shred of dignity she had by hurling that pilfered ring into the drain. The punishment was absolute. There was nothing left to take from her, the void complete. Harlan had hollowed her out, and I had simply shattered the empty shell, the fragments irretrievable. She was my blood by marriage. But she was not Miriam's daughter. Not yet. Miriam was a warrior, a creator. Leora was just a wreck adrift. But broken things can be remade or they can be discarded, the choice pivotal. I had not decided which, the decision weighing heavy. I let her kneel there for another full minute. The cold air was sharp biting. She shivered, wiping her mouth with the back of her dirty sleeve, the gesture defeated. I reached into the inner breast pocket of my suit. I didn't pull out my wallet. I didn't pull out a ledger book. I pulled out a single, simple nickel key on a plain metal ring, its surface dull. Barrett glanced at me, just a flicker of his eyes, recognition dawning. He recognized it. It was a unit key for the Elm Avenue complex. He nodded once, understanding the play, approving. I didn't walk over to her. I didn't crouch down and put a comforting hand on her back. I didn't hold her. I stood 6 feet away from where she knelt. I tossed the key. It made a small, dull thud as it landed on the wet sod right next to a cardboard box labeled apparel. She flinched at the sound, startled. Her eyes, red and swollen, blurry with tears, tried to focus on it through the haze. She looked at the key. Then she looked at me. Her mind, shattered and confused, couldn't process this new piece of information amid the chaos. "What?" she whispered, her voice raw and torn from sobbing. "What is that? Is this more humiliation? Are you giving me the key to the abode you just locked?" "You will not be on the avenue," I said. My voice was flat. There was no warmth in it. There was no pity. It was a statement of fact, unadorned. "The key opens apartment 4C, 1620 Elm Avenue. It's one of my buildings on the east side." Her eyes widened just a fraction. A tiny, desperate spark of hope ignited, flickering. "An apartment. You mean you'll let me—" "It's a studio," I said, cutting off that hope before it could blaze, extinguishing it. 500 square feet, a single room, a small efficiency kitchen, 1 bath. It's clean, it's secure. It is vacant. She started to cry again, but this time it was a different sound. It was the weak, gasping sound of relief mingled with resignation. "Oh, Father, Father, thank you, thank you. I'll repay you. I promise I raised one hand, silencing her. "I am not finished." She went silent, the words dying on her lips. "I am not giving you the apartment, Leora. I am leasing it to you. I have already paid your first 4 months' lease and the security deposit. Consider that your termination package from this family. After 120 days, lease is due on the 1st of the month. $700. No exceptions, no postponements. You will be a lessee in my building, and I am a landlord, not a benevolence. You miss a payment, you will be evicted, just like today." Her face, which had lifted for a moment, collapsed anew. Hope dashed. But Father, I have nothing. You saw what Barrett did. My ledgers are frozen. I have no currency. How can I—" "You will get a job," I said. The words were as hard and cold as the concrete curb she was sitting next to, unyielding. A job. Leora, a real job. Not style advisor, not assisting Harlan manage his firm. A job that gives you a tax form, a job with a paycheck. You will work as a clerk at a store. You will serve tables. You will mop floors. You will do whatever it is you have to do to earn $700 a month. You will learn what your mother and I did. You will learn what it means to earn your own survival. She stared at the key, its metal dull in the light. Then she stared at me. Her mind was grappling with the cold, harsh reality of the lifeline I had offered. It was not a rescue, it was a sentence. A sentence to a life of hard labor she had always believed with every fiber of her being that she was above superior to. I don't know if I can, she whispered. The last of her fight was gone, evaporated. Then you'd better learn fast, I said, because this is it. This is the last thing I will ever give you for free. The next move is yours. I turned my back on her. I didn't wait for an answer. I didn't wait for a thank you. I didn't help her pick up her boxes. I didn't offer her a ride. I walked back to the silent, waiting Bentley. Barrett was already holding the door open for me, efficient as always. I got in, sinking into the soft leather, the interior warm and insulated. I didn't look back. As the car pulled away, the window gliding up with a silent whir, I glanced in the side mirror. The last thing I saw was my stepdaughter, Leora Whitaker, 42 years old, kneeling on the wet sod of my front lawn, surrounded by the cheap, ruined furniture of her old life, staring at a single nickel key. She was finally truly on her own, isolated in her reckoning. 7 months more than half a year can feel like an eternity, or it can pass in the blink of an eye, time's passage merciless. For me, it was a whirlwind of conferences, ledgers, and the quiet satisfaction of steering my domain decisions layered with purpose. For Harlan Whitaker, my son-in-law, it was the end of the world, a collapse total. The national case against him was airtight. Barrett had presented the U.S. Prosecutor's Office with an impeccably packaged case, replicated legal documents, electronic deceit, misappropriation, and the endorsed fraudulent bill of sale for my abode. The state of Colorado added its own charges for the attempted conservatorship deceit. Harlan, the man who thought he was a genius, the man who thought he was smarter than the deranged elder, took a plea agreement. He couldn't risk a trial. He knew about the recordings. He knew what Leora knew. He was sentenced to 8 years in a national minimum security prison. 8 years. He was 43 years old. By the time he emerges, he'll be over 50. A discredited felon with nothing to his name. His life is over-erased. I didn't even attend the sentencing. He was no longer my concern, faded into irrelevance. My concern was Leora. For 7 months I had done nothing. I honored my side of the pact. The 4 months of prepaid lease in that East Side studio came and went. 120 days. Then the first lease check was due. I sat in the Apex suite in my weekly meeting with Barrett. The morning sun streamed in, casting long shadows. "All right, Barrett," I said, steepling my fingers thoughtfully. "It's time. What's the report on apartment 4C? I expected one of two things. One, that she had missed the payment and was already being evicted by the building overseer. Or two, that she had found another man, another dupe to attach to, and had relocated. Barrett looked down at his report, a small satisfied smile playing on his lips, unexpected. "She paid Elias." I paused, surprised. "She paid... how she's not employed." "That's where you're mistaken," Barrett said. He slid a surveillance photo across the desk. It wasn't a clear photo. It was grainy, taken from a vehicle, but it was her, my stepdaughter. She was wearing a green apron with a small embroidered emblem on it. Her hair was tied up in a net. She was handing a bag of groceries to someone at a checkout lane. She has a job." "She has had a job for 6 months, Barrett confirmed. "Started 3 weeks after you left her on the curb. She's a cashier at a place called Harvest Market on Elm Avenue, not far from her apartment. Full-time $8 an hour minimum wage plus occasional bonuses." I stared at the photo, the image blurring slightly as I processed. The woman in this picture was not the woman I knew. The woman I knew wore imitation luxury, got spa treatments, and thought work was curating her online presence. This woman looked weary. She looked lean. She paid the $700, Barrett continued. "On the first of the month for the last 3 months in full by cashier's check, she takes the transit to work at 6 a.m. every morning. She works the early shift. She returns home. Most evenings she doesn't venture out. Her lights are off by 10 p.m. I was silent. 6 months of rising before dawn. 6 months of scanning items for strangers. 6 months of living on minimum wage, scraping by. She hadn't called. She hadn't begged. She hadn't collapsed. I looked at the photo again. She's actually doing it. It appears so, Barrett said. She's learning what it means to labor. I handed the photo back to Barrett. Thank you. That's all for today. He nodded and left me alone, the door closing softly. I stood at the window looking down at the city, the bustle below a reminder of life's relentlessness. My stepdaughter, a cashier. I didn't know whether to feel proud or repulsed, maybe both conflicted. But I knew one thing, I had to see it for myself to verify. The next day, I didn't take the Bentley. I didn't wear the suit. I went to my private garage and got in the car I used for Rancher Eli, a 12-year-old Chevy sedan. I put on my old plaid shirt, my worn jeans, my scuffed boots. I drove to the east side, the route familiar yet distant. Harvest Market was exactly what it sounded like, a small local grocer squeezed between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop. The bell on the door tinkled as I walked in. It was bustling, noisy, the smell of fresh produce and baked goods thick in the air, mingled with the hum of scanners. And there she was. She was behind the counter moving fast. Paper or plastic? She called to a customer. She was bagging items. Her movements quick practiced, efficient. She was wearing the green apron and the hairnet. She didn't look up. She was just a blur of stressed efficiency amid the chaos. I got in line. There were 4 people in front of me. I watched her. She didn't beam at the customers. She just processed their orders, took their payment, and moved them along. This was not a vocation. This was survival gritty and unrelenting. Then it was my turn. Welcome to Harvest. Did you find everything? She started her head down, scanning items. She looked up. She froze, the color draining from her face like water from a sieve. I saw her hand, the one holding a scanner, begin to shake subtly. The customer behind me sighed impatiently, the sound intrusive. Leora, I said, my voice quiet, steady. What are you doing here? She whispered. Her eyes darted around, terrified someone would see me, would connect her to this old, poor-looking man, the association mortifying. I'm here for some groceries, I said. I'm busy, she stammered, looking at the line behind me, the pressure mounting. I can wait. She swallowed. Her training kicked in. She stared at the register, avoiding my gaze. What will you have? Just a loaf of bread and milk. She punched the keys with trembling fingers. That's $5.50. I pulled a $10 bill from my pocket, my old worn wallet, the one she recognized from years past. I placed it on the counter. Her hands were trembling as she bagged the items. She spilled a few coins from the change. I'm sorry, she muttered, grabbing a cloth to wipe. She was embarrassed not just because I was there, but because she, Leora Whitaker, was the one serving, humbled. She put the bag in front of me. She opened the register, took my 10, and counted out the change. $4.50. She put it on the counter, still avoiding my eyes. Her cheeks flushed. I took the bag. I took the change. I turned to walk away. I paid it. Her voice was low, but it cut through the noise of the shop like a thread through fabric. I stopped. I turned back to her. What did you say? She finally looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She was exhausted, lines etched from fatigue. But for the first time in her life, they were clear, unclouded by pretense. There was no manipulation. There was no angle. There was just a deep, profound weariness and something else. A flicker of pride hard-earned. The lease, she said, her voice stronger, resolute. It was due yesterday. I paid it. I paid all of it with my currency from this job. I'm not late. I looked at her, really looked at her. The stepdaughter I thought I had lost. The woman who had screamed at me, who had sided with a thief, who had valued a fantasy over her own stepfather. She was gone, transformed. This person in front of me, this person was new. She had paid her lease $700. She had earned it 50 cents at a time, incrementally. This was the first honest thing she had done in 11 years. This was the first glimpse of Miriam I had seen in her since she was a child, resilient. I nodded slowly, acknowledging. Good, I said. I turned and started to walk out. I got to the door. I stopped, one hand on the handle, hesitating. Leora. She was still watching me, her expression uncertain, expecting another blow braced. Next Wednesday, I said. 11 a.m. Barrett's office at the Apex Suite. What? What for? Don't be late, I said. There are some papers you need to see. I pushed the door open and walked out, leaving her standing behind the counter, confused, terrified, and for the first time hopeful, a seed planted. The lift ride up to the Apex Suite was the longest of her life. I knew this because I watched her on the security feed, her figure small and hesitant. She walked into the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton private residence still in her green polo shirt and stained green apron from Harvest Market. She was clutching her worn backpack to her chest like a shield protective. The attendant, a professional I've known for years, didn't blink. He simply said, "Miss Hawthorne, your stepfather is expecting you." She flinched, not used to being called Miss Hawthorne in a place like this, opulent and distant. She got into the private lift. The 12-second ride to the top must have felt like an eternity, ascending from her new world. On the east side, a world of transit stops and minimum wage, into mine, a glass area in the sky. The lift doors opened directly into the salon. She stood there frozen, immobilized. Mr. Barrett and I were waiting. We weren't in suits. We were in business casual. We looked simply like men who belonged here at ease. Leora looked small. She smelled faintly of stale produce and fear, a contrast to the polished air. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the sculptures on the walls, the quartz floors, the sweeping view of the Denver panorama behind us, overwhelming. She couldn't comprehend it, the disparity jarring. "You're late," I said. My voice was neutral factual. It was 11:02 a.m. The transit was delayed, she stammered, twisting the strap of her backpack nervously. I had to switch twice. I'm sorry, Father. I'm sorry, Mr. Barrett. She wouldn't look at us. She was looking at the oriental rug, a rug that cost more than her annual salary, at the market, its patterns intricate. "Sit down, Leora," Barrett said. He gestured to a sleek modern chair. It was not a comfortable-looking chair. It was a chair for business utilitarian. She sat on the absolute edge of it, still clutching her backpack tightly. Barrett opened a thin, elegant calfskin folder with precision. "Leora, your stepfather, has summoned you here today to discuss a matter pertaining to your mother, Miriam Hawthorne." At the mention of her mother's name, Leora's head snapped up alert. "Mother, what does she have to do with this?" "Your mother was a brilliant woman, Leora," I said, speaking for the first time since she sat my words weighted. She was the soul of Hawthorne Ventures. She was also very perceptive. She saw things. She saw people. She saw your husband Harlan the very first day she met him. Leora flinched, pained. "Father, don't." "She saw the scavenger inside the ensemble, Leora. I said, she told me after your betrothal gathering that man doesn't love her, Eli. He loves what he thinks we have. He's a predator. I thought she was being too severe. As it turns out, she wasn't being severe enough." Barrett slid a document across the glass table smooth. "Before she passed, your mother established several financial instruments. One of them, the Miriam Hawthorne Family Trust, pertains directly to you." I saw a tiny, desperate flicker in Leora's eyes. Currency. After 7 months of poverty, she thought she was finally being rescued. She thought this was a handout salvation. "However," Barrett continued, and that one word hung in the air, cold and heavy as lead, "your mother attached several very strict non-negotiable conditions to this trust. She was not going to give you a single dollar that your husband could touch." "What? What conditions?" Leora whispered, her voice faint. "The trust," Barrett said, reading from the document methodically, "was to remain sealed and inactive until one of two conditions were met. One, your 48th birthday. Or two, the date you were legally and permanently divorced from Harlan Whitaker." Leora gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. She knew he was a leech," I said flatly, "and she would rather her currency sit untouched for decades than let him get his hands on it. Your husband's arrest and felony conviction have triggered the second condition." Leora looked like she was going to be sick, her face paling. "So there's currency. I'm not." "So fast," Barrett said, raising a hand authoritatively. "That was only the first lock. Your mother built a second wall around this trust. She knew Harlan, but she also knew you." That hit her a blow. What do you mean she knew me? Miriam wasn't just afraid of Harlan's greed, Lyora. She was afraid of your weakness. She was afraid that unearned currency given to you would be a poison. She was afraid you would become well exactly what you were 7 months ago, someone who feels entitled to things they didn't earn. I took over, my voice sharp cutting. Your mother stipulated, I said, that the trust would only be unsealed after you met a second set of conditions. And I quote, the trust will activate only when my stepdaughter, Lyora Hawthorne, demonstrates sustained, verifiable independent employment for a period of no less than 7 consecutive months. Lyora looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief, incredulous. Employment? You've been at Harvest Market for 7 months and 4 weeks, Barrett said, checking a file precisely. You have met the first requirement. Congratulations. But there is a third, and it is the most important. Lyora looked terrified, like a pupil about to hear her final grade braced for failure. The trust is not a lump sum, Miss Hawthorne. It is not a jackpot. Your mother was smarter than that. It is a conditional matching fund. A matching fund I don't understand. It's very simple, Barrett said, his voice precise, explanatory. Your mother wanted you to learn to work to save to build just as she did. The trust will match dollar for dollar any verified contributions you make to your own personal retirement savings, a 401k, an IRA, any qualified plan. You save $1 from your paycheck, the trust will deposit $1 into your ledger. You save $6,000 in a year, the trust will match it with $6,000. You save nothing, the trust gives you nothing. Lyora was stunned. She was speechless, processing. This wasn't a rescue. This wasn't a lottery ticket. It was homework rigorous. So I'm not rich, she whispered, the words tasting bitter. No, I said, standing up and walking to the window, the city sprawling below. You're not. You're a cashier. You will only get what you earn. Your mother's greatest fear was that you would become, Harlan, someone who schemes and waits for a handout. This was her final lesson to you, Lyora. This was her way of protecting you from him and from yourself. Lyora looked down at the documents, her eyes blurring with tears, overwhelmed. She knew. She saw all of this. She knew you were weak. I said, my voice a little softer, now tempered. She knew you followed. You didn't lead. And she loved you so much that she built this fortress around her legacy. She wouldn't let Harlan take it, and she wouldn't let you waste it. $1 for $1, Lyora whispered, the math clicking in her head slowly. If I manage to save $12,000 next year, the trust will give you $12,000, Barrett finished. If you save 60, it gives you 60. It is a ladder, Miss Hawthorne. Your mother built you a ladder, but you and only you have to do the climbing. Lyora sat there for a long time. The smell of produce still clung to her faintly. She looked at her hands, her nails short and unmanicured, her skin rough and chapped from the handling and cleaning at the market. She wasn't a princess. She wasn't an heir. She was a 42-year-old woman in a studio apartment working for minimum wage. But for the first time, she had a path. It wasn't a handout. It wasn't charity. It was a challenge. It was a partnership with her deceased mother, enduring. She wiped her eyes, not on her sleeve, but on a tissue she pulled from her backpack. She took a deep, shuddering breath, composing herself. She looked up, not at me, but at Barrett. How do I start? How do I set up an IRA? Barrett. The man who manages my $92 million empire gave her a small, rare smile, approving. He slid a second set of forms across the table. I was hoping you would ask that. Let's get to work. For 90 minutes, Barrett walked her through the paperwork meticulously. He explained how an IRA functioned. He showed her the activation schedule for the trust. He gave her the contact information for a complimentary financial consultant in one of my buildings, someone who specialized in modest income retirement planning, accessible. Lyora just sat there, her world, which had collapsed 7 months ago, slowly, painfully beginning to reform. But it was a different shape now. It was not the soft, easy shape she had expected. It was hard. It was all angles and effort forged in adversity. She signed the last paper, her hands still smudged with a little residue from the market. She pushed the documents back toward Barrett. She finally looked at me, her eyes clear, exhausted, but no longer desperate. She was just processing, adapting. So she said, her voice quiet, reflective. This is it. I work, I save, and I get $1. That's it, I confirmed. You get exactly what you earn, nothing more, nothing less. She nodded, accepting. She stood up, pulling her cheap backpack onto her shoulder. She looked for a moment like a student leaving the dean's office, chastened yet determined. She started to walk toward the lift. Then she stopped. She turned back. There was one last loose thread, one last piece of her old entitled life she needed to account for unresolved. The abode, she said. The abode in Willowbrook. Our old abode. What happened to it? You bought it. Summit Holdings. You bought it. But are you going to... She couldn't finish the sentence, trailing off. I knew what she was asking. Was I going to vend it? Was I going to give her the currency? After all, this was there still a jackpot waiting for her. Was her reward for 7 months of good behavior going to be a check for nearly $500,000? The old Lyora was still in there somewhere, hoping for the easy way out lingering. I looked at her. I needed her to understand that the past was gone, every last piece of it eradicated. I vended it Lyora. Her face fell disappointment, etching lines. Oh, you vended it to who? To a developer. A real one this time. They're demolishing it. They're going to build 5 condos on the lot. Demolishing it? She whispered, aghast. The abode where she grew up, gone, erased. It was just a structure of wood, Lyora. It was tainted. I walked through it one last time after the enforcers had locked the door. I stood in the den where you screamed at me. I stood in my study where he sat replicating my name, planning to have me declared deranged. I looked at the veranda where Miriam and I sipped tea for 45 summers. I paused, memories surfacing like bubbles in still water. Her memory wasn't in that abode anymore. You two, you and Harlan, you poisoned it. You scrubbed her from the walls with your greed. It was just a resource, so I liquidated it. She looked up, her eyes filled with a new practical question. The question of a person who now understands the value of $1, pragmatic. So the currency, she said. The $940,000. You just kept it. You want to know what I did with the currency, Lyora? I asked. Are you wondering if you get any of it? Are you hoping there's a trust fund from that too? I let her sit in that uncomfortable silence. I let her see the last flicker of her old self, that greedy, grasping part exposed. She winced and looked away ashamed, chagrined. No, I just wondered. I'll tell you what I did with it, I said. The first thing I did, I took $90,000 and I sent a certified check to Mr. Caldwell's accounting firm. She looked confused, puzzled. What? Why Harlan? They dismissed him. Because he pilfered it from them. I said, my voice sharp, accusatory. He misappropriated it from his partners. It wasn't my currency to keep. It wasn't his to pilfer. It was theirs. I made them whole. That's called integrity, Lyora. It's a concept your husband never understood. She nodded, saying nothing absorbing. Then, I continued, I took $60,000 and I sent it to the Thompson Inheritance Trust. Her face went white, recollection dawning. She remembered. She remembered the ring she had hurled into the drain. The Orphans Fund, Lyora, the currency Harlan used to buy your engagement ring. I couldn't let those children pay the price for his sins. I couldn't let them lose their education fund because my stepdaughter married a thief. So I paid it back. I cleaned his slate. I made sure that the last filthy piece of his betrayal was erased from the world. I undid the damage you two caused. She was silent. She had no words. She was ashamed. She was finally, truly ashamed, the emotion deep. After a long moment, she whispered, That's $150,000. What about the rest? The $790,000. I looked at Barrett. He looked at me. He knew what was coming, anticipated. The rest, Lyora, I said, is none of your business. It is not your inheritance. It is not your safety net. It is my currency, and I have already put it to work. What do you mean? I used it to establish the Miriam Hawthorne Benevolent Fund, a foundation in your mother's name. It has one very specific purpose. What purpose? It provides subsidized, secure housing and legal assistance for elderly individuals in the Denver area who are victims of financial exploitation, specifically exploitation from their own families. Her jaw dropped, stunned. Turns out, I said, walking to the window, the view expansive, it's a much bigger problem than I ever realized. Your story, Leora, as ugly as it is not unique. There are hundreds of Harlans out there and hundreds of Leoras who are too weak or too greedy to stop them, and hundreds of Elas who don't have an apex suite to retreat to. I turned back to her. The fund's first beneficiary was a man from Aurora, 82 years old. His daughter tried to do the exact same thing Harlan did. We relocated him into one of my buildings last week. Your mother's legacy won't be weakness, Leora. It will be strength. Her memory won't be tainted by what you did. It will be defined by what I am doing now. I let that sink in profound. The currency was gone. The abode was gone. The fantasy was gone. All that was left was the key in her pocket to a $700 a month studio apartment and a matching fund trust that would only reward her own hard work earned. This was her new reality. This was her new life redefined. 1 year later, the world rotates and people transform, or they are fractured by the rotation evolution or destruction. Harlan Whitaker sits in a low-security national prison in Wyoming. His 8-year sentence for electronic deceit and misappropriation was a harsh reality, but the lifetime disbarment was the true end. He has no future. He has no wife. He has no currency. He is just as I told him, a specter fated. I still reside in the Apex Suite. My life is the same as it always was, quiet, managed, and purposeful, steady. Hawthorne Ventures continues to expand, and the Miriam Hawthorne Benevolent Fund is flourishing. We have, as of this month, housed 19 elderly residents who were victims of domestic financial exploitation. We have 4 full-time lawyers on staff who do nothing but combat fraudulent conservatorship claims and recover pilfered assets. I read every case file scrutinizing, which is why I see my stepdaughter Leora every Thursday. She doesn't know I'm watching. I sit in Barrett's office, and on the monitor, I watch the live feed from the Foundation's case management floor unobtrusive. She is not a director. She is not a manager. She is not even an aide. She is a case reception coordinator. She is the lowest paid full-time employee in the entire organization, entry level. She still lives in the 500-square-foot studio apartment on the east side. She still takes the transit to work. She still earns after taxes just enough to pay her $700 lease, buy her groceries, and put a small, painful amount into her new IRA ledger, an amount that the Miriam Hawthorne Trust is pledged to match dollar for dollar, incentivizing. I watch her on the screen. She is different, evolved. She is 43 years old now. She wears simple clothes, a pants and a blouse, no brands I would recognize. Her hair is clean but tied back, simply practical. She wears no jewelry, unadorned. She is thin, but she looks strong, not frail, resilient. An old man, easily 85, is sitting at her desk, weeping. The man's nephew, he is explaining, took his savings. Leora is not pampering him. She is not making false assurances. She is just listening attentively. She slides a box of tissues across the desk. She waits patiently. When the man is finished, Leora speaks. Her voice is low, calm, reassuring. I understand, she says, and I believe you. Here is what we are going to do first. She is competent. She is empathetic. She is exactly the woman Miriam always wanted her to be fulfilled. It took losing everything for her to find herself rebirthed through trial. That afternoon, she came to the Apex Suite. This is our new routine. Once a month, she delivers the reception reports to me in person. She doesn't come as my stepdaughter. She comes as my employee professional. The lift doors opened. She stepped into the salon holding a simple manila folder composed. Father, she said. It was a simple greeting, neutral. Leora, I replied, not rising. I gestured to the business chair she had sat in 7 months prior. Have a seat. How are the new cases? She sat her back straight, not on the edge of the cushion, but in the center. She belonged here not as an heir, but as a professional earned. They're heavy, she said. She opened the folder. We have 4 new conservatorship flags this week. This one, She slid a paper toward me, is particularly bad. A son-in-law just like he. She stopped hesitating. Just like Harlan, I finished for her matter of fact. She nodded. Yes, just like him. And what is your recommendation? I asked, looking at the file scrutinizingly. I've already assigned him to our legal team for an immediate restraint, and I've cross-referenced the asset. The son-in-law is already trying to vend it to a private cash-only purchaser. I looked up at her. He's using the same playbook. It's always the same playbook, she said, her voice tired but determined. They think they're smart. They just think the elderly are stupid. We sat in silence for a moment. The chasm of our past between us, but the bridge of our new work connecting us sturdy. The trust, I said, changing the subject abruptly. Barrett tells me you've maxed out your IRA contribution for the quarter. Yes, she said. It's not easy, but I'm doing it. I eliminated my streaming services. I'm learning to budget more. I'm managing. Good, I said. Your mother would be proud of that. A small, genuine smile touched her lips for the first time warm. I think so too. I wish I could tell her I'm sorry for not understanding her. You can tell her, I said, by continuing to do the work. She nodded, resolute. She gathered her files efficiently. Well, that's all. I should get back. I have to catch the 6:15 transit. She stood up, walked to the lift, and pressed the button. As the doors opened, she turned back to me. Father. Yes, Leora. I wanted to say thank you. For what? For the trust for the job. No, she said, shaking her head. Thank you for the key. Thank you for not letting me perish on that sidewalk. You didn't have to after what I did. You could have just driven away, but you gave me a chance. It wasn't a chance, Leora. I said, it was a test and you haven't failed it. Not yet. She smiled again, a real smile, this time authentic. I'll see you next month, Father. See you next month, Leora. The lift doors closed and she was gone, departing. I turned back to the window, back to my city contemplative. My stepdaughter had stood in my den and screamed, settle the dues or vacate. And I did. I vacated. I left her to the man she had chosen. I let her walk headfirst into the trap she had helped him set. I vended the abode out from under her. I froze her ledgers. I exposed her husband as a thief, a gambler, and a fraud. I watched her world shatter on a cold, wet lawn. I destroyed the life she thought she deserved, the life of unearned luxury she had built on a foundation of lies. But in doing so, I gave her something real. I gave her the chance to build a life she could actually earn authentic. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't a gift. It's a key to a 500-square-foot room. Sometimes the only way to save your child is to show them the necessary terrible cruelty of their own choices, transformative. Did you like my story? I'm curious about your locations as you listen to this, so share in the comments. And please, if you've ever had to learn a hard lesson or teach one, press that like icon and join the channel for more real-life stories. Thank you for listening.